I'm here in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill with Congressman Pete Sessions of Texas District 17. So it's basically the Waco area. So thank you for being here with me and Happy New Year's.
And it is a beautiful new year with an opportunity to where we're making sure that we're talking about ideas that are relevant to young people. Ideas that let them know how important not only their feedback is, but to grow into this great country. For America to be the greatest nation in the world, it means that we need people just like you who speak to people about how things work so that you grow and learn about this great nation. I call it an American exceptionalism.
Well, thank you. So I want to start off by talking about the election. It's been pretty controversial. You have Biden supporters who, of course, are really excited about the outcome. And then you have supporters of President Trump who feel, a lot of them feel it wasn't fair, and that the election, there was a lot of stuff going on that wasn't right. So I want to ask you, do you feel the election was fair, and do you feel the American people should be confident in the election results?
Well, it's a new year, and the new year has revealed a number of things that we did not know back in November, that we did not know in December. And that is that this challenge that's taking place is producing information. And the information that is coming about, in my opinion, most of it, the American people did not even understand that. There were people who said that this was a fair and great election. But underneath that surface, there is a challenge that has taken place, as we know, in these 5 states that make up what was, in essence, the battleground states. And this battleground has produced data and information, and it's my hope that what will really continue happening and happen is that the questions, the challenges of things that were assertions of difficult issues, that they will be fully looked at and vetted. America is a nation that prides itself on having fair and free and honest elections. And we actually, a huge part of our foreign policy is about how we interact with other nations around the world for deciding their leadership. And as you know, we're a republic. We are a nation where we then have a democracy that elects people based upon a ballot that's based upon, yes, party orientation, but ideas. And so I believe it's important that where a challenge exists or an assertion of something, whether we know it's true or not true, that it gets vetted by local people who are election people who, in essence, open themselves up and say, you may come and look at the work that we have done. And much of that is not openly being accepted. And so if we go back to many, many years ago of a case, a court case, Supreme Court case of what was called Gore v. Bush. And in that case, what happened is there was actual data that was given from the state of Florida whereby people came in and looked at actual ballots, not the people who worked for the state of Florida, but actually the two sides, representatives from the two sides who came in and looked at information that they could then say what is fact and what wasn't. And as you know, there are assertions that there were, in different locations, different anomalies that occurred. First of all, it's important to remember that on the high side, President Trump received 12 million more votes than he did the last time he ran. When President Obama was reelected, he got 1 million fewer votes. So the question is that of all the things that have happened with this election, the winning of all the Senate races so far, the winning of some 12 new congressional seats, those are called coattails. So if the coattails from the bottom up all over this country happened, Does that mean that President Trump didn't have a coat to have coattails and that he did not do as well? So the questions that come up are like in Detroit. 120,000 votes that were brought in after hours that were only for one candidate. A marking on a ballot and yet nothing else. And it was a perfect mark. We should be able to know, the American people, even though I'm from Texas, the integrity of the election should say they should, to the people who live in Michigan, they need to satisfy themselves that they had a fair election. And that means not, as election officials, we'll tell you our eggs are fresh, but rather to debunk the individual piece parts of assertions that are made against them. And that is what then will determine this outcome. I hope that's what happened. Otherwise, America's going to have a difficult time, whoever the president is, talking to other nations when we, in fact, might be guilty of improprieties ourselves, of not clearing the air.
And with the doubt in the integrity of the election, what evidence have you seen that would lead you to believe that the election was either fair or unfair?
Well, it's these assertions that are being made by people of irregularities, things like the 120,000, things like we heard and have seen that supposedly came from officials in Pennsylvania. When people looked at it, over 1 million mail-in ballots were mailed out, and some, perhaps more than 25% of them were received back the next day and counted. How could you mail out 1 million ballots and expect the next day for them to be marked and counted? That is incomprehensible. And so it's these kinds of things that in Pennsylvania, they need to open that up and ask the direct questions. Is this true or not true, and how did it work?
Okay, so one of my other questions is, let's say Joe Biden does become president on the 20th. What are some issues you would be willing to work with him on if or when he's inaugurated?
Well, the issues that do come up that a president has, that's Article 2, they run the administration. They run and pick the people who will be secretaries of these departments. These departments then will establish lots of things that they want to approach. But in Congress, Article 1, we still have things that naturally must be done. The budget. Congress needs to produce a budget. We need to decide how much money we're going to spend. We need to decide the priorities of that. That in a Congress that is very close in majority and minority will then lend itself to, I think, a hybrid of ideas. I don't think someone is going to slam dunk move the other one. Now, we don't know what's going to happen theoretically tomorrow or the next day in Georgia and how long that will take to materialize. But then the winning of the Senate has a huge component about whether Democrats would own the House, be the majority in the Senate, and then have the presidency. So I think their agenda would change as we know that too.
And you were talking about the House getting things done. It's a really close majority for the Democrats. And I've been able to speak with a lot of people around the country. And a lot of them are fed up on both sides. They feel like Congress isn't getting anything done. They feel that politics gets in the way of productivity. And that these are the people they're voting for because they tell them, and the politicians tell them, when I get to Washington, I'm going to do this, this, and that. And then in the end, politics gets in the way, and they feel that nothing gets done. What do you think? How do you think that issue could be fixed to ensure that things are done and people aren't just sitting around all day doing nothing because they don't want this to happen because it's not good for their party politically? How can you ensure that doesn't happen on both sides?
Well, these are valid questions, and this is where we have seen over the last few years when the American people chose to have a Democratic majority in the House. Mrs. Pelosi then was literally in charge of that answer. And yet we had a United States Senate that was Republican, and then we had a Republican president. So many of the, quote, movements forward were not possible. They were not possible because what Mrs. Pelosi wanted to do for instance, in the COVID stimulus package that came out, a lot of those things have not been completely decided. In other words, how we're going to pay for that back, and how are we going to do what might be the next package and the next package. And this is some of which comes about through the administration. And so the administration becomes an arbiter of, we have a robust number of laws already out there. We already have a lot of things where we have given to the executive branch the authority and the responsibility. So what I would say is maybe Congress has done nothing. Well, Mrs. Pelosi has proved that. That's why one of the reasons why they lost 12 seats. They moved dramatically left, and now that agenda will be neutered, in my opinion, has been neutered. So it will then fall upon the administration.
Now, you've been in Congress, you were in Congress for 22 years.
Right.
What do you think, what are some of the things you learned, and what is the biggest thing you learned over your long tenure in the House of Representatives?
Well, I learned that a majority needed to have an agenda. They needed to stand for something. And I would say the hallmark of what, during my chairmanship of the Rules Committee and chairmanship of the National Republican Congressional Committee at different times, was about first winning the majority, going and what I called then selling the fight. Why did Republicans need to be in charge, and what would their agenda be? And that's what 2010 was all about when we won back the majority from Mrs. Pelosi being Speaker for 4 years. And then during that period of time as Chairman of the Rules Committee, did we do what we said we were going to do, even though we had a Democratic president, President Obama? And the answer is that under the Constitution, Article 1 clearly enumerates that all revenue matters will be initiated and be handed by the United States Congress. In other words, the House of Representatives. And in that, we did not allow, I did not as Chairman of the Rules Committee, in collaboration with the Chairman of the Budget Committee, we did not bring forth spending measures that would spend more the next year than they did that year. And so in 2013, there was a huge fight with President Obama where the government was shut down, and we went into what was called sequestration, which was a methodology which was brought forward by President Obama, and it gave a chunk of money that would then be reduced over time. We took the what I would call a bidding war that we won of signing bonus and moved back about $150 billion from 2011 to 2008 spending. And in that process, we then froze it. And in freezing that, we did now not allow spending levels for discretionary spending to be raised over these 6 or 7 more years that President Obama would serve as president. So that's what was our gift to the country. That's how we stood for something. And even though the American people wanted to doubt it because mandatory spending was rising at a higher level because of Obamacare and Social Security, the number of people retiring, as always, our country is going through change. It was not apparent to people, even though the piece that Congress is responsible for in budgeting stayed flat.
Now, I have two more questions. And now I just asked you what you learned while you're in Congress. Now I want to ask you what you've learned in the past 2 years when you haven't been in Congress. Have you had a new perspective on anything, looking, inside from the outside instead of looking outside from the inside? Did you learn anything new?
I think I have, and it was a lesson that was taught to us by our Democratic colleagues. They won the majority because we lost the majority in 2018. I'm not so sure they won it. They didn't win it off an agenda. But when they came into power, Mrs. Pelosi then had really left-wing, strong, new class of people who felt like that their ideas is exactly what America wanted. And it was about changing dramatically this country. And of course we saw that play out when it played out with the riots and anti-police and Black Lives Matter and this agenda that came forth that was never talked about on the campaign trail. So I have learned in watching that someone can overplay their hand, that someone can lose control of what they were trying to keep by people of who I'm sure have goodwill in their mind, but their goodwill to turn America completely left without the American people saying, yes, that's what they wanted. So they won in 2018, but they didn't sell that. They tried to sell it in 2020 and were soundly defeated. So I think the American system does work, but we need every conservative to come, or person that's concerned about whatever that new agenda is, needs to see it for what it is and then have an opinion. And they did.
And my last question is, we are really divided as a nation right now. Some people feel Trump won, some people feel Biden won, right? So we're really polarized. So what do you think kids my age could do to help unite our country?
I think that no matter who it is, whether it be President Trump or a new president, President Biden, I think every one of these young students like you need to develop an expertise. And I'd like for it to be like what I taught my boys. My oldest son is a physician. He grew up in 5th grade knowing he wanted to have a dream to be a physician, and he learned what it would take to make that, not only math and science, but interacting with other people. He's an Eagle Scout, as both my boys are. He was state wrestling champ in high school. He achieved things. And I think that it's important for young people to see themselves as very important to the process, but there's a steep learning curve. And that steep learning curve, like when I grew up, it was getting up to throw a paper route every day. It was to subscribe myself to an ethical content and a moral content. And I became an Eagle Scout. And even though college is a little bit different time, you still have the attributes of what you're aiming for. Perhaps it's military service, perhaps it's starting a job. Some 50 years, I've never missed a day of work. So the things that I learned and hold as values, as principles that I grew up with, I have maintained pretty much my whole life and believe in them today. A strong belief in God, a strong belief that faith does matter, a strong belief in other people and helping people, a strong belief in helping those with disabilities and those who need help. But likewise, a meritocratic service where you earn your way rather than half of you get this and third of you get this and 20% of you get nothing. Put us all in the same batch and let merit determine the outcome. And then lastly, our country. Our country is based upon founding traditions and principles that have made America great. And why people want to change that, I don't know, but it will lead to instability and uncertainty and make us just like the rest of the boys, like all the other countries. America is an idea that people come to this country and want to come to this country and look at this country in a way that they admire us. Well, if we're just one of the normal guys, because we've given up on what made us strong, and that is people working hard, content to work hard, people having to get up early and sacrifice. If we just go to where everybody's given things, if we go to where we worry about social politics being more important than hard work and merit, I think we're making a mistake. So these are the things that I would want your young people to really think about. Are you going to allow somebody to cheat on you in class? Are you going to give something to somebody that did not work hard, that did not earn that? Are you going to give them? Or do you view that it was an equal opportunity that everybody had to go and achieve things? And we don't mind giving people help, but to give them something that was not actually earned is a very difficult thing for me. So I hope that the next generation of people will get it in their mind, their contribution, what they want this country to be, and begin working to that. And I want to thank you for taking time to be with me in this brand new year as you talk to young people across the country. And congratulations to you for your hard work, your learning. You will learn as you have these past 4 years how to do things, and increasingly you will have new vistas and new challenges and new arguments that happen. Stay after it.
Thank you so much for your time.
You bet.